Well, hello, everyone. My name is Dara Rath, and I'm the pastor at Faith Lutheran Church in Port Elgin, Ontario, Canada. And each week I bring you stories and essays from different authors that take about 5 minutes to watch. And so this week, this Sunday coming is September the 11th, and we know that that's an important date to remember because it's the day that the planes hit the towers in New York City. Now today I want to remember the heroes in Gander, Newfoundland. The people on the flights who were not allowed to go into U.S. airspace were rerouted to Gander, Newfoundland. And so there's this wonderful book called The Day the World Came to Town by Jim DeFeed. And it has stories about the people who helped the folks on the planes, who set up the gyms, who fed all these people, etc. So I'm just going to read a few paragraphs from this wonderful book. And this is really an abridged version because I'm choosing a few stories. So here we go. Here is about some of the heroes. As he prepared to make his final approach to Gander, Captain Reinhard Noth told the passengers that the problems in the United States were forcing them to land in Canada. He didn't tell them what those problems were. 20 minutes later, they were on the ground. It was around 1 p.m. Newfoundland time, and Noth marveled at all of the planes he saw lining the taxiways. For the first time in hours, he felt a sense of relief. He was on the ground, his plane and passengers were safe. Hugo Boss, CEO of Hugo Boss, wondered what type of problems in the United States could have forced them to land in Canada. More important, he wanted to know when they would be leaving. He had a lot riding on this year's fashion show that he needed to get to in New York. Once on the ground, he had the answer. Noth explained the situation in New York and Washington. He also noted that they had just received word of a fourth plane having crashed in Pennsylvania. Thousands were feared dead. Baldessarini felt ashamed for worrying about his fashion show. Fashion Week now seemed so trivial. How quickly a person's priorities could shift, he thought. We know that the Saudi people offered to fly Mr. Baldessarini, the CEO of Hugo Boss, back home, and he refused. He wanted to stay and help the Newfoundlanders. In this book, there's documentation of most of the planes and their communication on their arrival and the fears and concerns of the passengers. But there was one other factor that I want to share with you. Excluding the crews, there were officially 6,132 passengers on board the 38 flights, but Bonnie Harris feared there were actually more. Had anybody in authority bothered to check the cargo holds in the belly of the planes? Bright and early Wednesday morning, she decided to find out for herself. She didn't trust the people running the operation to know what they were really doing, and so she called the work area for the ground crews directly. "Do you have any animals on these planes?" Just as she suspected, they did. The manifests for 12 of the flights showed the planes were carrying an assortment of animals, including at least 9 dogs, 10 cats, and a pair of extremely rare bonobo monkeys. Harris asked if anyone had made arrangements to feed or provide water for any of these animals, who by this point had been cooped up in tiny cages about the planes for 24 hours. "You just can't leave them like that," she complained. Harris called one of her assistants, Vi Tucker, and the two women loaded up a truck with pet, food, water, cleaning supplies, and anything else they thought they might need, and lit out for the airport. Once they arrived, they began sizing up the situation. The animals were stowed away in cages in the same compartments as the luggage. As Harris went around taking a quick look inside each of the planes, she knew these animals were going through and they were emotional ordeals. In some cases, Harris couldn't even see the animals as they were buried behind mounds of suitcases, but she could hear them crying and barking. One at a time, they crawled into the belly of the airplanes, tunneling their way through the mountains of bags to reach these animals. As best they could clean the cage and then lay out some water and food for them. In addition to being cramped, it was also hot, and it smelled. The worst part, though, was seeing the animals, who were obviously scared and disoriented. The women looked for tags on each of the cages that might give the animals names, so that the animal might hear something reassuring. Since they were all coming from all different parts of Europe, the women thought these pets might not understand a lot of English, but what every dog and cat can recognize is its name. On a British Airways plane, they found a cat that had a pill taped to the front of the cage. The cat was apparently epileptic and needed regular medication to ward off seizures. Aboard a Lufthansa flight, there were 2 Siamese cats and 10-week-old purebred American Cocker Spaniel by the name of Ralph, pinned on the door. The women fell in love with Ralph immediately. "This is going to work," Harris told humbly. "It took us all day to feed these just one meal, so we have to do something else." The women were going to need more help with the dogs and the cats, and most of all, they needed to get these animals off the plane. Desperate, they called the governor's regional veterinarian, Doug Tweedy. He now learned that there were animals on those planes, and after hearing the horror stories from Harris, Tweedy leaped into action. After several phone calls to his superiors in St. John's, a deal was reached whereby the animals could be taken off the plane and kept in a vacant hangar where the women could care for them. Humbly knew if they hadn't received permission to remove the animals, some of them would have certainly died. There are so many heroes involved in this story in Gander, Newfoundland. It showed the hospitality of Canadians. It showed the display of kindness and caring, and especially for those animals. Thank you, Newfoundlanders. Thank you. Blessings on your day, and thanks for stopping by to Take 5.